Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Retracing History here on Readout Productions. And when we go out to retrace history, normally it's by car, and normally I get stuck into traffic. Yeah. Traffic congestion just keeps getting worse and worse with each passing day. Yeah, and sometimes it makes you want to go to a simpler time. And fortunately here, not far from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the community of Washington, we can travel back to that simpler time. We're at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, and we're going to explore the legacy of trolleys, streetcars, interurban cars, PCC cars, whatever you want to call them, their impact not just on Pittsburgh history, but on the development of the United States of America. All right, you're probably asking, what exactly is the significance of a trolley in history? Well, when it comes to the United States of America, these were the predominant mode of daily transportation for workers, for shoppers, for people commuting between town to town, for people that are going to see family, for people that are going to funerals, to weddings, to any major civic event. This is how Americans moved through the first half of the 20th century. However, trolleys have their origins 100 years before then and are still being used today, but their peak was usually is seen to be the first half of the 20th century.
You'd be surprised to discover the idea of a streetcar came to the United States in 1832. Horse-drawn carriages that rode upon iron rails, improving traction and speed for transporting large crowds in one vehicle. This innovation came about to counter the poor road infrastructure of the time period.
Before we had paved roads were mainly bumpy dirt paths for carriages and cars. Those paths were passable most days, but when rain, snow, or traffic occurred, they become muddy messes. Wagons and later cars would often be stuck in the mud, but putting wheel on smooth, steady rails helped them glide right along. So this exhibit helps all visitors, but particularly younger visitors, to understand why the streetcar was created, because rails, as long as you make sure they're not covered up with snow and dirt, your vehicle, in this case a streetcar, is going to move pretty easily. And this is pretty interesting. This is a horse car rail or step rail that was used in Delaware County, Pennsylvania in the 1800s until the 1930s. So before they actually do the electrical powered cars, they started out with just simply horse-drawn metal carriages essentially in these streets. You can average about 5 miles per hour. So again, this is more using feels. I don't know how it's going to be for the video, but I'm moving my car along, and yeah, I'm having to push. But if you put it on the tracks, and if I know how to put it on the track, look at that. Look at that. Technology in motion.
Of course, relying on horses and mules for your main mode of power has its drawbacks. These streetcars do not operate well on uneven terrain, necessitating large teams to pull the consist. Teams had to be regularly changed out to avoid exhaustion, requiring a transit company in the cities to maintain a large herd. Several alternatives developed, including the famed cable cars of San Francisco. But in the 1880s, electricity became a viable method of powering a city's mass transit system. In fact, the community of Scranton, Pennsylvania became home to the first all-electric streetcar system, hence its nickname of the Electric City. Surprisingly enough, an electric streetcar receives its power through a very simple mechanism. A circular connector rolls against a live wire above the tracks. The electricity is then fed through the pole into the controls, then underneath to a motor. The way the shoe rotates along the line may remind a fisherman of trawling their line, hence the name trolley pole.
Now, streetcars, trolleys,
they operated in multiple major cities throughout the United States and also saw heavy use in the rural countryside around these cities in the first half of the 20th century. But they're especially important to Pittsburgh history. And the reason is Pittsburgh was involved with the current war. You've probably heard of that before. Thomas Edison developed direct current, to which George Westinghouse developed alternate current. And ultimately, these two titans of electricity duked it out in the late 1800s. Everybody knows Edison's name, but George Westinghouse actually had his factories here in Pittsburgh, and ultimately, alternate current was what was going to win, and still is still the method of transmitting electricity across the world today. So Pittsburgh was at the forefront of electrical technology when we go into the 20th century, which makes it ripe for experimentation with how to implement electricity in mass transportation. So that's why Pittsburgh is very important to the history of the trolley, because this is where a lot of experimentation was done on what would be the best streetcar design on Earth. It also helps that we have every type of geographic nightmare that can be thrown at an element of mass transportation. We got rivers, we got mountains, we got all sorts of inhospitable weather, from hot, humid summers to freezing cold, snow-capped winters, to the variety of floods that occur in the spring, to the odd tornadoes. Surprisingly, Pennsylvania gets a lot of tornadoes, small ones. So yeah, if you're going to test out a mode of transportation, Western Pennsylvania is where you want to do it.
This is one of the Pittsburgh Railway Company high floors that the Trolley Museum owns, and it's tour guides informed us that it's called a high floor because there has to be a large gap from the floor to the rail grade to be able to facilitate the engine that operates the whole system. This was one of the early standard forms of trolleys used not just in the Pittsburgh area, but throughout the United States. There's another image there. They were able to move far quicker than the previous horse-drawn cars. However, they were really only able to be used within the city limits. And another issue was the fact the stairwells, there was a very tall step to get up inside these cars. Now, one of the advantages of these early forms of trolleys was they could attach a trailer, which was essentially just another type of, it could be another trolley, or it could just be a simple passenger car that had no engine inside. People prefer to actually ride it in the trailers than these streetcars themselves due to the high step, which meant a lot of the trolley companies realized, maybe we need to find a different way, a different design. But these are some of the more classic designs for trolleys. Interesting interior layout. Of course, you got your rows of seats, but then you got a very long bench on the one side. And of course, you got your leather straps to hold on for standing room only crowd. Well, how do you think they resolved the high floor? Well, they made low floor cars. So they were able to find ways to make powerful motors that were able to fit in a smaller capacity underneath the car. And these guys came online in the first few decades of the 20th century. This is just beautiful. Look at this ad up here. Make your service attractive. Carnegie Steel Cross Ties. Carnegie Steel Company. Now, this particular car saw service on a wide variety of routes in the Pittsburgh area. Actually, it would serve all the way through 1987, and we'll get to that in a moment. During the Second World War, this particular car served the crews that were working at the shipyards on Neville Island, just west of the city of Pittsburgh. A lot of people aren't aware that Pittsburgh was one of the main manufacturers for the LSTs, the landing ships that you're going to see at the invasion of Normandy and other beach landings during the Second World War. So crews that built those LSTs that ended the Second World War, they commuted to work in cars just like this. And again, it is called the low car because the steps are far more easier to get out of, and the exit on this one's right in the middle. And you can actually, it might be hard to see on the camera, but it's kind of just a natural slope down. It's very easy, very gentle. Grab the handle and step out. So car number 3756 actually was able to get here to the museum grounds in 1954 under its own power, but that was not the end for its revenue service. So in 1976, Pittsburgh's Bicentennial Committee actually cooperated with Port Authority Transportation, and they actually brought it out of the museum and took it back down to downtown Pittsburgh to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the United States of America. And that was not all for it. In 1987, it would actually return to the lines yet again to promote the history, the transportation history in Pittsburgh. Now, by that point, they had the pantograph now powering these interurban cars, not the trolley pole. So they actually had to make a custom-made pantograph just for this streetcar behind me. If you're wondering why you're having deja vu seeing this particular shot, well, 3756 is in the background of a very famous photograph of Fred Rogers. Now, there is an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that was filmed here at the Trolley Museum in 1983. Now, this is not I don't think this is the trolley itself that Fred Rogers operates in the video, but once they were done shooting, they made sure to get a establishing shot of Mr. Rogers sitting right there on that step. And it's now been one of the most widely published photographs of the famed children's show host. In the first quarter of the 20th century, there was money to be had in the streetcar railway system, and this shows it behind me. This is a private car for executives of the Toledo Traction and Light Company. When you go inside there, it's carpet flooring, a nice, nice soft chairs. There's a bathroom. There's even a kitchen in there. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the luxuries that the executives of the streetcar railway companies got to experience came to a sudden halt during the Great Depression. Now, although ridership would probably increase because, well, you can't really afford to drive your car for gasoline, for the gas prices. That being said, a lot of these railway companies are going to cut the fat, as it were. And the first thing to go were the luxurious cars such as this. They stripped this one down and actually became a work car for the rest of its operating history, but the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum have done a fine job of restoring it to its former glory. These electric cars, instead of having placards about their destinations, well, if they had a really long route, they had these wonderful scrolls, and man, they're pretty long. Of course, they'd be all coiled up, and then the operator would turn the coil to the next designated stop. Wouldn't mind owning one of these. This one's really cool. Got Forbes Field, famous for being the scene of the Pittsburgh Pirates' victory of the New York Yankees in 1960. And yes, us Pittsburghers are still very proud of that victory almost 60 years later. Don't laugh at me. In the early 20th century, powering a train was relatively simple. It was a boiler with wheels attached to it. Just gotta put enough coal in there to build a hot enough fire to boil enough water. Well, trolleys, streetcars, interurban systems are a little more complicated because they're electrical. And this is a blueprint for signals that are along a line near Dormont, Pennsylvania. All that circuitry work, and this is just going into the signaling. We're not even talking about actually powering the cars themselves. Oh, I feel like I've invaded enemy territory because this is a Philadelphia streetcar for the Philadelphia Traction Company. Look at this advertisement here for the Phillies and the Senators at, Look at that. I love the advertisements. It's one of the coolest things. These trolleys that are properly preserved are museums of advertising. So it's like we have the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum here, and then all of these trolleys act as museums to advertising from bygone era. And also really cool in this detail, of course, Philadelphia being the cradle of the Revolution, that was put there for the bicentennial in 1976. Hey, heads up, in a couple years, 2025 will be the 250th of our country's founding. This is also a J.G. Brill Company car made in Philadelphia for Philadelphia Rails. Now, when this car came to Pennsylvania, it would be, I guess you want to say, it would be made famous by a Pittsburgher, not a Philadelphian, because this is the trolley that Fred Rogers operates in an episode when he visits this museum back in the early 1980s. The crew here at the time of the museum trained Fred Rogers how to operate a trolley. And trolleys are very important symbols, especially when it comes to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, because of the red trolley that takes viewers from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood to the neighborhood of make-believe. Why a trolley? Why not a steam locomotive? Why not a Model T? Why did Mr. Rogers choose a trolley? Well, he is from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and the West Penn Railway Company had a trolley service to Latrobe, and he remembered very fondly taking the trolley to commute to friends and family in his childhood. So the trolley for Fred Rogers, as it was for many people in the first half of the 20th century, was the mode of transportation and brought a lot of fond memories with it. So Mr. Rogers wanted to preserve that memory when he developed his television show here in Pittsburgh through PBS and WQED in Pittsburgh, I should say. His mode of transportation from going to reality to make-believe was a trolley. Now, it wasn't this particular trolley. Actually, it's more like the trolley that's behind me over here. This open-air car operated in Rio de Janeiro for many years. It is a popular. It actually operates. It is a very popular car to be used here in the summer months at the museum. So imagine that being red. That's what Mr. Rogers' trolley looks like. But it came full circle in 1983 when he ended up making an episode about how to operate a trolley and got to learn it here, fulfilling a lifelong dream.
There are the old trolleys there.
Oh, yeah.
So to find a solution to fighting automotive transportation, the presidents of multiple transportation companies got together in a variety of different conferences and were kind of bouncing ideas off what would be the perfect car. And well, this is what they came up with, what is known as the PCC car, the President's Conference Committee that organized these designs. They came in two different batches. The first one came out before the Second World War. Second batch came out after. And yeah, definitely streamlined in the design. So no more are you going to have operating controls on either end. PCC cars only have the operators on one end. You have a proper rear to the car. Now this would require for some lines to be redesigned to have loops at the end, so you couldn't just dead end your track. There would be nice elegant loops, but that was no problem because everybody wanted to ride these things. They were so cool. They're still cool today. Sleek design, attractive body appearance, still retains the low floor design with a large middle entrance and a forward entrance. Nice seating. The seating is a definite upgrade from the Tweed. We now have cushioned seating. A lot of light in here. I know it's a little dark, the video, but we'll be riding 4004, which is a later built PCC car, and it's the same basic design. You're going to notice a lot of lighting with the multiple tiers of windows. And yeah, this car was able to compete with the automobile for a short while. So this is pretty cool. This is the uniform of Pittsburgh Electric Railway operator Anna Nixon. She became employed by the company in 1945 at the tail end of the Second World War. And there's a plaque over here relaying a tale she has relating to Victory in Europe Day in 1945, that basically all the male operators and conductors in Pittsburgh walked off the job to celebrate. So she was actually traveling on one of the streetcars. She wasn't working that day, but she volunteered to fill in as an operator for one of the shifts. Ended up working 6 hours during VE Day as everybody celebrated. She worked with the Pittsburgh Railway Company until 1958 and was a longtime friend with the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum.
So we're actually riding probably the most modern trolley in operation here at the museum, and this one does have some history to it. This was the last PCC car that operated in revenue service within Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This originally was built in, I believe, the late 1940s, then they rebuilt it in the 1980s for modern use, and it saw service all the way up to the very end of the Drake line at the end of the 20th century.
You're like, oh, this part of a truck. I know.
I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty sure I'm a genius thanks to Google.
In the later days of the trolley, they found a better system of connecting to the live wire. The trolley itself, the trolley pole, was replaced with a pantograph. Imagine like a diamond, essentially, like a three-dimensional diamond. I was able to draw far more electrical power and made these PCC cars go far quicker. Pantographs were also used by regular electrical locomotives for a while. When number 4004 came to the trolley museum, they actually had to disconnect the pantograph, because that's how it's operating when it arrived, and bring it back to its earlier years when it operated with a simple trolley pole. We are in the nose of what they would call one of the bullet cars. These cars are most famous on Philadelphia's SEPTA line, but I think they were used in a few other cities. They started seeing use in the 1930s, and they are called bullet train because, well, they look like a bullet. They were trying to find a design for a streetcar that had the best aerodynamics. And in fact, this car could reach up to speeds of 80 miles per hour. Now, part of the reason was that this particular car was getting power not from above but underneath, because this is when the third electric rails were introduced. So this particular SEPTA car had gone into service in 1960. It actually operated all the way right up till the end of the 20th century, and then SEPTA donated to the museum. It sat outside for many years before it got to be put inside the trolley building, and our guide informed us that even though it sat out there for many years, its stainless steel structure, no rust. And cars like this on the SEPTA transit lines in Philly were known as almond joy cars because the air ventilation ducts on top make it look like a candy bar.
In just a span of 100 years, trolleys had come a long way, from only moving a few miles per hour, being pulled by horses, requiring multiple teams of horses to get up hills. You end up with these beasts, these stainless steel beasts like the bullet train and the subway train in front of me, and they're able to hit as quick as 80 miles per hour. But these advancements were a little too late, especially for the interurban cars that roamed the rural countryside here in western Pennsylvania and in other urban areas across the United States. The trolleys had an extension of life thanks to the Second World War due to the rationing of rubber and other materials such as gasoline. People were relying on public transportation once more in the United States of America. But upon the war's conclusion and the economic boom that's going to occur, cars are going to be purchased by just about every GI that comes back home, and their families are going to move not just out of the city, not just out of the suburb, not just out of the urban area. They're going to be establishing suburbs that were far from the cities and could not be accessed by streetcars. People preferred having the freedom of driving on the paved highways that are going to be developed, the interstate system in the 1950s. And here, at least in Pittsburgh, most of the streetcar systems are going to die out throughout the 1960s and 70s. Although, it's a little bit ironic. There's a video that plays here at the Trolley Museum, and they recall the tale of the last chance trolley that operated out of Wilkinsburg, one of the neighborhoods of Pittsburgh in 1967. The last day, it was a cold January day, it was operating. The last time streetcars could be used here in Wilkinsburg area. Well, it was a horrible snowstorm hit Pittsburgh area, and the last day the streetcar is supposed to operate and be replaced by buses, all the buses are stuck in the streets, in the slush, in the snow, in the ice, and the last chance trolley was able just to fly right by them. So maybe streetcars, trolleys, interurban cars, maybe they're not an outdated form of transportation like people believe.
This particular car was very interesting. It saw heavy use on the West Penn railway system, but after the railway system closed up in 1952, this was purchased and converted into a home. And something I've discovered after being here at the museum, this is not an uncommon thing. Here's actually a little bit of an ad about this car being this car being converted into a home. So there you see it, the body of this interurban car. Ta-da! Turned into a home. The car cost the family just $250 in 1950s currency. And if you're a couple, you don't have a lot of large family, this would be a perfect place to live in. The Railroad Museum acquired it and restored it as best they could to its former glory. Right now it houses a lot of equipment for their other restoration projects.
Well, that's going to do it here from the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. So I don't want you guys to think that streetcars are completely gone and are completely dead. At least here in Pittsburgh, there still is one more interurban line. It's known as the T. Runs out to the South Hills. Doesn't really operate. It doesn't look like 4004 behind me here. Still has the pantograph, but they look like proper railroad cars. So, and in other cities, there's actually kind of almost a comeback of the streetcar. Philadelphia, Boston, New Orleans, they all operate classic PCC cars and some older models of cars. Because of their nostalgic value, people are in demand of wanting to ride streetcars. And also, new trolleys are being planned and possibly will be built one day because the congestion within cities like Pittsburgh. People don't like driving in congestion. Funny story about that. So there is starting to be a rise. Possibly in the future, we'll see a resurgence of trolleys all across the United States. But that's going to do it from here at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button down below. Be sure to share this to friends and family to spread the word out about the history of streetcars. If you want to be the first notified when a new video comes out from this channel, be sure to subscribe to Redoubt Productions. And we'll see you in the next video.